Alright. I'm gonna say Kahala Yahweh by Shem Yahweh Shai by Shimra Kakadash. Barakati Yahweh. Barakati Yahweh Shai. Barakata Kakadash. I want to get double honors to the elders and apostles of GMS who continue to teach me this truth in Horuwal. I want to say Shalom to the brothers out there, the Akim, who are of like mind. Because I believe, what's the brother's name? The Real Apologists. That YouTube channel talked about and went into brothers. And, we have to be very careful with who we call our brothers. Someone who is your brother, it could mean someone who's genetically your brother, but it could also mean someone who is of like mind. So when I call you my brother and I speak of brothers, I mean people of like mind. If you're not of the same mind, then you are not my brother. So we get that clear. Of course, I want to say shalom to you few sisters out there, of course, who watch, remain humble and submissive to the husbands, and who watch and pray with all sincerity. So I was reading this book called The Black Jacobins, Toussaint Louverture, and the San Domingo Revolution by C.L.R. James. And this, as the name suggests, it's all about the San Domingo Revolution, Toussaint Louverture. But in the beginning of the book, they kind of start talking about a little bit of slavery overall, talking about slavery in West Africa, and going into a lot of very interesting things about how the whole idea that black people, quote unquote, Negroes, which I'm not going to say, you know what they are, right? The children of the Most High, the Israelites. But I'm gonna try to limit my use of that word so this video don't go down. But what I'm saying, I'm just gonna say Jacob, man. So, and I'll of course sprinkle in Israel in there as well, just so you people know what I'm talking about. But it does talk about how the whole idea that the black man was a savage and a psycho and whatever, and this and that, and was a whole bunch of baloney. Because what happened was the reason that our people became like that back then and became cannibals and crazy was because we were detribalized. We had tribes and cities and lands set up, and when those places started to get torn down, we just went crazy. And I mean, that's completely natural. The same thing is going to happen today. We have all these cities, but everyone's going to become savages real soon. Once those cities start to break down, once that economy starts to get shut down, which you're hearing about that. One of these videos I saw a GMS brother. Oh, I'm not sure if he was GMS, but he's GMS affiliate. Brother in the truth. He said that in South Carolina that gas stations have already started to run out of gas, and there's a shortage of fuel. And that makes sense because if there's a shortage of tourism, that means a shortage of foreign currency, and if there's a shortage of foreign currency, then there's a shortage of fuel and other supplies from around the world. So this system's being destroyed, and we're going to see what they did to us. The same thing is going to happen to them. So suffice to say, back to the point. Black Jacobins book I'm reading. The author C.L.R. James makes reference to this guy Emil Torde. Emil Torde is a Hungarian-born African anthropologist, but he's kind of different. He could be a Jake, because when he talks about African, which he really talking about Jakes, he does talk about it in a sort of non-biased way. He tries not to insert his bias into it. And I mean, I'm not gonna say why, but he died at age 55, which is really early. So more than likely they killed him because this guy was going deep into West Africa. He went into the Kuba Kingdom, and when you look up his biography, he found that the Kuba Kingdom had connections to European royalty. So if he would have kept going on, he would have eventually found that the West African is in fact an Israelite. And of course they had to stop him, and they killed him right in his tracks. All right. So we're going to read through this. This is called The Things That Matter to the West African. This is pretty much a sort of lecture that he's talking about, and it's I was just gonna tell you the philosophy of our people pre-slavery and how our people think, and I'm gonna prove to you that these guys are in fact Israelites when you start to look at how the kingdoms were set up. Okay. Oh, let me just make sure I'm good on time. So we're gonna read through. In the days of old of the slave traffic, and even after it was suspended by more legitimate trade, the west coast of Africa was known as the white man's grave. It was visited on business only. The few books of this period were not written by scholars as a rule, but the authors had experience and were keen-sighted on the whole truth to an astonishing degree. To Ross and Manson's discoveries, not less than to the motor car, we owe the advent of the tripper and the constant output of literature more amusing than instructive. The casual visitors represent the West African as a lovable or vicious child. According to the disposition of the writer, they scarcely ever touch on the serious side of life and insist on that which in their ignorance they find funny and grotesque. No greater insult could be offered to the African than to hold him up to ridicule. He is so sensitive on this point that ridicule is not only a recognized form of legal punishment for malefactors, but is also used to curb the rich and powerful. The delightful folk tales, best known in Americanized form through Uncle Remus, are satires, pasquinades, in which misdeeds of kings and chiefs are lashed with pitiless irony, the privileged position of the storyteller sheltering him against reprisals. Which, when you look at Deuteronomy chapter, let me see, yeah, when it talks about we shall be a proverb and a byword. Byword. This should pop up immediately. Hopefully it doesn't. Here we go. The 37th verse. Deuteronomy chapter 28, 37. And thou shalt become an astonishment, a proverb, and a byword among all nations, whither the Lord shall lead thee. So we're gonna look at that. Let's look at what byword means. Sharp word, sharp cutting word. What's a byword? Ninja. Which ninja just means black. Which this whole Uncle Remus, actually I haven't looked that up. Let's actually look up what Uncle Remus is. As a fictional title character, was a journalist, and he produced several Uncle Remus books. He is perpetuating black stereotypes. Well, it seems like this guy's like an Uncle Tom kind of guy. Yep, here it is. It's Uncle Remus. That's a new one, man. That's a new insult. Instead of calling someone Uncle Tom, call him Uncle Remus. But let's look in deeper and let's see more what this guy is about. He wrote those stories to represent the struggle in the southern United States, and more specifically in the plantation. He did so by introducing tales that he heard and framed them in the plantation context. He wrote stories in a dialect, which was his interpretation of the Deep South Negro language of his time. For these framing and stylistic choices, his collection has encountered controversy. Didactic. Stories are written in the I dialect. Well, yeah, it just seems like this is just a kind of a group of stories made to make fun of the quote unquote black man, American black man, the Judite. All right, I'm gonna pause out and come right back.